Hello and welcome back to the GCN Racing News Show. Coming up this week, the Cobbles Classics have arrived and they kicked off in style. We'll recap an epic edition of the E3 Saxo Classic, as well as the men's and women's editions of Gent-Wevelgem. That's not all though, because stage racing season is ramping up ahead of the Giro d'Italia, and chief protagonist Remco Evenepoel and Primož Roglič went head-to-head at the Volta Catalunya. And things got spicy between the duo. That and much more on this week's Racing News Show. This week in the world of racing, grim conditions were anticipated in Flanders, and the weather gods lived up to the billing, as this unlucky spectator found out.
Okay, Sam Sitcon on the left-hand side, trying to move up, get up to that breakaway, splashing through a few puddles. There's Caleb Ewan right at the back in the middle there.
Oh dear.
Oh, oh no.
And as the E3 Saxo Classic taught us, winning one of the biggest one-day races when all three of Wout van Aert, Mathieu van der Poel and Tadej Pogačar line up together is a near impossible task. Last year's edition was a Jumbo-Visma demolition job, with Wout van Aert and Christophe Laporte rolling across the line together, and the sports directors had the luxury of deciding which of their riders would win the race. Well, no such dominance this year, because Mathieu van der Poel and Tadej Pogačar were also on the start line. And with 85 kilometres left, Van der Poel's team initiated the first move, Dries de Bont attacking from the peloton and getting ahead of the race, just before the mighty Tyenberg, which is where Jumbo-Visma lit up the race last year. And when we did reach the climb, Mathieu van der Poel delivered an electric attack. Only Wout van Aert could go with the Dutchman. But Wout decided against collaborating with Van der Poel at this stage of the race, with multiple teammates in close proximity behind. There was a large regroupment and ultimately a group of three new attackers formed with 66 kilometres left. Crucially for Van der Poel and Van Aert, they both had riders in the group in the form of Søren Kragh Andersen and Nathan van Hooijdonk. Matej Mohoric was the other rider up the road. He's a master at getting up the road when the tempo is low, allowing him to be positioned perfectly when the number one favourites make their move. And well, that they did. It was Van der Poel again launching the move on the Stationberg. The two other pre-race favourites followed, Van Aert on Van der Poel's wheel and Pogačar, who had to close a larger gap. They bridged to the leading trio, and just like that, the race-deciding group of 6 riders had been formed. Pog then accelerated on the Paterberg, but all 6 riders were still in close proximity at the foot of the Eau de Quarmont. The mythical climb begins with 40 kilometres left in the race, but it's the last of the major tests the profile has to offer. Pog went from the beginning of the climb. A long effort with some steep gradients is a section of the course which suits his profile particularly well. Van Hooijdonk and Kragh Andersen were swiftly spat out the back, with Mohoric following suit shortly after. And then Van Aert lost the wheel too. 2 bike lengths quickly became 3, then 4, but the defending champion kept his composure and regained contact on the climb. A TV moto then crashed to the ground, but fortunately didn't severely disrupt the race. Some spectators, though, were involved, so best wishes to everyone caught up in that particular instance. The final climb was the Tegenberg with 19 kilometres left, and it didn't have any effect on proceedings, unless you're Wout van Aert, who earned some bathroom furniture by virtue of being first over the top. So, with a flat run in, the 3 Titans entered the conclusive phase of the race. Let's dissect what happened over on the touchscreen. So, we arrive at the finale of the E3 Saxo Classic. 38 kilometres remaining. We're on the Eau de Quarmont and it's crunch time. The moto falls ahead of the riders. Luckily doesn't disrupt the action too much, but as we get the overhead shot, we can pause it right there and dissect the situation. So, Wout van Aert at the back of the group. He's probably the happiest if this comes down to a group of the 3 riders. He's probably the quickest when it comes to raw power output, but Mathieu van der Poel, of course, sat just ahead of him on the road for the moment. He's defeated Wout van Aert on numerous occasions when it's come down to a sprint just between the two of them. He beat him at the Tour of Flanders in 2020, Cyclocross World Championships earlier this season as well, so perhaps he's happy for a sprint as well. But added to the situation, of course, this time, we have 2-time Tour de France champion Tadej Pogačar. Very quick rider for a GC rider, but when it comes down to these real power merchants, Van der Poel and Van Aert, he's probably a little out of his depth when it comes to a sprint. So perhaps Pogačar is the man to look out for to attack. So if we go to the finale of the race, inside the final 5K now, 3.5K to go, you can see Pogačar has laid off the back of Van Aert and Van der Poel. He is about to attack. So let's just play this on a little bit and pause it right there. You can see Van Aert has spotted the attack of Pogačar. Van der Poel, he's completely unaware to what's going on. So let's just watch this play out right here. Van der Poel spots Van Aert coming round to follow Pogačar, gets on the wheel of Van Aert, but that all-important gap, Van Aert has closed it. Pogačar unable to get away with 3.3k to go right now. So that's his first bullet. Does he have another? Let's see. 1.3k remaining, Pogačar going again, but crucially, this time you can see Van der Poel already, he's looking straight at Pogačar. He knows what's coming this time. He's not making the same mistake twice. So if we watch this one play out now, you can see Van der Poel straight on the wheel this time. He's not making that same mistake again, just outside the Flamme Rouge. And now if we pause it right here, Van der Poel and Van Aert, they're not going to move from this situation. They are staying on Pogačar's wheel. Van Aert is not coming round Van der Poel. This is the situation we have coming into the finale. So we have the final few hundred metres now, and you can see Van Aert is in the perfect position. He is exactly where he wants to be, on the back of the group. Pogačar and Van der Poel, they know he's the danger. They're constantly looking round. Let's see what happens here. And you can see Van Aert does get the jump. Pogačar keeping the tempo high crucially, which does allow Van Aert and Van der Poel to come in with some speed, perhaps helping Van Aert in the finale. He defeats Van der Poel, 50 metres to go. He celebrates to the line, and a crucial win for Van Aert, a massive victory ahead of the Tour of Flanders next week. On to Gent-Wevelgem now, and we have both the men's and women's editions to look forward to. Let's start with the women's race. At just over half race distance, a large peloton remained intact. First time up the Kemmelberg with just over 50 kilometres left, it was Kasia Niewiadoma, Lotte Kopecky and Anna Henderson who went clear briefly. They were caught swiftly though, but a show of strength from the three riders. Unfortunately, a large crash occurred with 44 kilometres to go, taking out multiple riders. Shortly afterwards, Marlon Reusser upped the tempo on the Bannenberg. There was no searing acceleration from the Swiss, a stealth attack you could say. With the chasing group looking around behind and some strong, consistent watts from Reusser, her gap grew and grew and grew some more. It was plain sailing for the leader until, with 5 kilometres to go, she went the wrong way. She quickly turned herself around though and got back on course, where she could enjoy the run-in without any further mishaps. Her final winning margin, a whopping 2 minutes and 42 seconds. Behind, the race for second was on, and the chasing group had gone clear, which featured the likes of Shirin van Amrooy, Pfeiffer Georgi and Christian Majerus. But the games began in the final kilometre, and they messed around to the point where the following group caught them with 400 metres left. However, 21-year-old Megan Jastrab sprinted to a fine second place, with Maaike van der Duin rounding out the podium for Canyon SRAM. To the men's race now, and without Van der Poel and Pogačar on the start line, all eyes were on Jumbo-Visma and Wout van Aert. The race opens up on the first ascent of the Kemmelberg with just over 80 kilometres to go, and Van Aert was notable by his lack of aggression here. A group formed featuring his teammates Christoph Laporte and Nathan van Hooijdonk, as well as Soren Kragh Andersen, Mads Pedersen, Matej Mohoric and many more danger men. Fabio Jakobsen also tried to bridge, but failed to do so and was swept up by the group behind. That meant Kasper Asgreen was put to the front by Soudal Quickstep. The team's best finisher at E3, by the way, was Yves Lampaert in a lowly 16th, and team boss Patrick Lefevre publicly criticised his team's performance in his weekly column for Het Nieuwsblad. Asgreen's tempo meant the leaders were caught prior to the next ascent of that crucial Kemmelberg. And this time, it was Van Aert time. He pushed away and only his teammate Laporte could follow. The final ascent of the Kemmelberg arrived with 35 kilometres to go, and the Jumbo-Visma duo had opened up more than a minute's advantage on the rest. The pair sailed towards the finish line at each other's side. Does this look familiar to you? Of course, it was the exact scenario by which Van Aert won the E3 Saxo Classic last year. So, the only question remains, who would win? And how would the team decide? Well, Laporte came agonisingly close to winning Gent-Wevelgem last season, but was pipped to the post by Biniam Girmay, of course, while Van Aert already has a Gent-Wevelgem title on his palmarès by virtue of his 2021 efforts. So, it made sense that Van Aert applied the brakes in the final few metres and allowed Laporte to go one better than he did last season. Now, I want to know what you make of this, so let me know in the comments. Was it the right call, or should Van Aert have won? He was apparently the stronger rider on the day, looking at the final ascent of the Kemmelberg, but for me, the team was spot on in handing this one to Laporte, particularly after he was so close to winning it last year. This week, we also learnt that relationships are ever important in bike racing, highlighted by Remco Evenepoel and Primož Roglič at the Volta at Catalunya over the last week. The duo are set to duke out the Giro d'Italia in May, and the rivalry is set perfectly. So, the race began with a short uphill finish, and the two protagonists immediately came to the fore, with Roglič outlasting Evenepoel in a sprint, who finished rapidly but came from some way back. Ida Schelling picks up a strong third place for Bora Hansgrohe. Then, Stage 2 and the Volta 2000, a monster climb which finishes at over 2,100 metres altitude. Esteban Chaves attacked, but was reeled in, and Remco Evenepoel was happy to set a hard pace in the finale with other favourites on his wheel. That, and his poor line into the final corner, perhaps cost him in the sprint, with Giulio Ciccone and Primož Roglič able to come around him, and the Italian taking a fine victory in the process, although no time for his trademark glasses throw across the line this time. Evenepoel and Roglič remain the key riders on Stage 3 and La Molina. With 3 kilometres left, Evenepoel attacked, and with Roglič holding the race lead by virtue of bonus seconds, he only needed to follow the Belgian. Notice the theme forming? Well, this time, Evenepoel was able to kick away and distance Roglič in the final couple of 100 metres, and celebrated emphatically across the line. The 2 seconds he gained on Roglič plus bonus seconds meant the race was tied, though Roglič remained in the leader's jersey. Would Remco live to rue his early celebration, where he could potentially have pressed on to the line and maybe earned the race lead? Incidentally, that was Evenepoel's first career victory in the month of March. He'd already ticked off every month between January and October off the list, so perhaps the extravagant celebration was worthwhile this time. That stat is courtesy of Jonas Crotter on Twitter. Well, Stage 4 came around and brought about the first opportunity for the sprinters. With a climb-heavy route, there were slim pickings when it came to sprinters on the start list. Caden Groves and Brian Coquard were the main favourites, and Coquard looked good, but Groves flew out the slipstream with 100 metres left and was ultimately victorious. Swiftly, the Remco-Rog show resumed on Stage 5, this time on Laporte. It was indeed Soudal Quickstep who laid down the tempo on the climb, and the Remco attack with just under 5 kilometres to go was inevitable. Primož Roglič was glued to his wheel though, while Marc Soler was also able to follow this time. João Almeida then demonstrated his pre-Giro acumen by bridging to the front group, where Marc Soler, who was behind his Portuguese teammate in the GC, was put to work on the front. This meant the group settled briefly, but Rog and Remco came to the fore inside the final kilometre, and the Belgian launched early. It ended up being too early though, and he exploded with 50 metres remaining, as Roglič flew to victory, not celebrating before the line, or at all in fact. The victory gave Roglič a crucial 10-second lead in the general classification. Stage 6 then, and it didn't look like a GC day on paper, but never count out these two. Over the top of the final climb, which peaked with 25 kilometres left, Remco launched a searing attack. Roglič immediately realised the danger and followed Evenepoel closely. But he held the race lead, so again, opted not to work with the Belgian, who repeatedly asked for a turn and became more and more frustrated until this happens.
Sometimes in race scenarios, riders will not ride with you. There's no point trying to ask the question because the answer is still no.
But an intermediate sprint followed, and Remco was quick to turn any frustration into watts by taking a second back from Roglič at the intermediate sprints. The duo were seen to be shaking hands afterwards, but some fuel poured onto the fire between the two riders. The sprinters survived the day again, and Caden Groves repeated his feat from 2 days prior to defeat Brian Coquard. The Frenchman won his first World Tour race at the Tour Down Under this season, but that was the 9th second place at World Tour level of his career. Anyway, the GC battle was still plastered all over the headlines ahead of the final stage, and the race would conclude on the brutal circuit around Barcelona. And it was deja vu. Remco Evenepoel attacked with some 28 kilometres left this time, and Primož Roglič kept him within touching distance. Marc Soler was along for the ride again until he was dropped with just under 13 kilometres to go. Despite Remco's infernal pace on the steep, Roglič was able to follow his every pedal stroke. Primož didn't compete in the final sprint, with Evenepoel taking stage victory, but Roglič securing the general classification by a mere 6 seconds. João Almeida was third on the podium, a whopping 2 minutes and 11 seconds behind. So, if that doesn't whet your appetite for the Giro d'Italia, nothing will. Evenepoel and Roglič both in scintillating form with almost nothing to split them. 4 of the 7 stages ended with the Remco and Roglič 1-2, and a little bit of spice has been added to the rivalry as well. 3 weeks of this? Sign me up. Winding back to Brugge-De Panne now, which occurred last Wednesday, and Flanders yet again threw up abysmal conditions for both the riders and spectators. Beginning with the women's, defending champion Elisa Balsamo was among the favourites for Trek Segafredo again. But with Lorena Wiebes now of SD Works and Team DSM's Charlotte Kool also in attendance, a potential large bunch sprint would be hotly contested. However, with 60 kilometres to go, crosswinds caused mayhem and threw that particular scenario out of the window. But Balsamo and Wiebes were both vigilant and managed to drag themselves into the leading group of 11 riders. Balsamo and Wiebes were both without teammates to help keep things in control though, an advantage Team DSM could boast with Pfeiffer Georgi and Megan Jastrab in attendance. Unfortunately, a nasty crash occurred with 11.7 kilometres left, taking Alice Barnes and Julie de Wilde out of contention. Barnes suffered a broken arm, while de Wilde fractured her left shoulder blade, wishing them both a very speedy recovery indeed. Back to the race though, Team DSM put their numerical advantage to good use. Jastrab attacked first, but as she was caught, Georgie countered. This with just over 7 kilometres left. No one responded immediately, and that was that. The 22-year-old cruised to the finish line to win her first World Tour race. She's been knocking on the door of a big win for a while, so it's great to see her secure one at the highest level. Behind, Balsamo and Wiebes finished second and third respectively. And I do want to touch on Team DSM here because they lost Wiebes over the winter to SD Works, of course, but how impressive have they been so far this year? They've used clever tactics to get the better of opponents and demonstrated their individual excellence too. Well, moving to the men's race now. Of course, this race does usually end in a mass sprint, and that much was clear with the likes of Jasper Philipsen, Fabio Jakobsen, Caleb Ewan, Olaf Koy, and many more on the start line. But those windy, miserable conditions caused carnage on the roads. With just over 60 kilometres to go, it was Alpecin de Koning and Jasper Philipsen himself who piled on the pressure. Philipsen was notable by his strength in this phase of the race, happy to ride on the front himself rather than hide in the wheels. It soon became clear that the race winner would come from their splits, and it looked like Soudal Quickstep's race to lose, with 4 riders up front, including Fabio Jakobsen. Not willing to hang around though, Jasper Philipsen attacked with 16 kilometres to go, and going with him went Olaf Koy, Fredrik Frieson and Soudal Quickstep rider Yves Lampaert. This left the Wolfpack in a tricky situation, with leader Fabio Jakobsen caught behind and the strong but less speedy Yves Lampaert in a group with the fast men. Behind, they put Davide Ballerini to work, but it was to no avail. Lampaert opted to hold out for a sprint rather than attack in the finale, and he looked good as the riders came into the final 100 metres, but Jasper Philipsen was on unstoppable form on the day and took a fine win ahead of Koy. Lampaert settling for third, Jakobsen could only manage 5th from the group behind, pondering what could have been had his team employed different tactics. The Coppi at Bartali also took place over the past week. Mauro Schmid secured overall victory. He finished in second place 3 times but failed to take an individual stage victory throughout. One man who did claim a stage win was Sean Quinn. He won stage 2, earning his first pro victory in the process. It was a good week overall for EF Education Easy Post 2. They finished 2nd, 3rd and 4th in the GC, also winning stage 3 with Ben Healy. The other stage winners there were Romy Cavagna, who won both stages 1 and 5, as well as Alexei Guerin of Bingo, who won stage 4. So, what have we got for you on GCN Plus this week? More cobbles, that's what. The big event this week is on Sunday, the Tour of Flanders or the Ronde. The who's who of classics racing will all be on the start lines for both the men's and women's races. That includes another mouth-watering clash between Van Aert, Van der Poel and Pogačar on the men's side, with Kopecky, Van Vleuten, Bousmo and Wiebes set to line up on the women's side. We'll be live with the breakaway from 8:45 BST on Sunday morning, with Ola Chenoy joined by Adam Blythe, Dan Lloyd and Danny Christmas. Soon after, live coverage of the men's race will begin, and then later on in the afternoon, it will switch to coverage of the women's race. Incidentally, if you'd like to start watching the women's race before the men's has finished, live coverage of their race starts at 2 o'clock BST. Just click on a separate poster on the app to see that. Stay tuned for our big Tour of Flanders preview this week, where we'll look at the routes for 2023, as well as all of the key riders taking part. And don't forget that we have our Classics t-shirt collection available on shop.globalcyclingnetwork.com, including this one dedicated to the Ronde. Both the men's and women's races are available to watch on GCN Plus if you're in Europe or the Asia Pacific, excluding China, Australia and New Zealand. For the rest of you, we'll have short highlights up as soon as we can once the races have finished. Ahead of that, we have another warm-up race in the form of Tour of Flanders this Wednesday. Outside of Belgium, we have a couple of other one-day races. It's the GP Miguel Indurain in Spain, which you can watch worldwide, and the Volta Limburg Classic in the Netherlands, which you can watch worldwide, excluding Canada and the US. Both races take place on Saturday. And then, this time next week, the Tour of the Basque Country starts. It's all going on at the moment. More on that race this time next week. Beyond the live racing, this week's World of Cycling focuses on whether Cobbles specialists are a dying breed. Join Connor Dunn. He'll be in the company of cycling legend Pippa York, as well as acclaimed author and journalist William Fotheringham. That'll be available to watch on GCN Plus from Wednesday. And this week's documentary on GCN Plus is one I'm very much looking forward to indeed. Dan Lloyd, Jeremy Whittle and Pippa York discussed the shocking downfall of Festina's empire. Take a look.
Festina, the team that rocked cycling to its core.
I don't think anybody was as prepared as they could have been for the sheer volume of what unfolded.
And what lessons can be learned from the Festina scandal and the race labelled as the darkest tour?
It just became ridiculous. You could just see it was going to get worse and worse until something major happened.
This is the story of that scandal, whose name is now indelibly written into cycling's history.
In other news, Antonio Taburi could be on the move to Astana, Kazakhstan, according to Gazzetta dello Sport. The Italian was suspended by his current team Trek Segafredo for 20 days after he was found guilty of shooting and killing a cat in San Marino. Meanwhile, Gerben Tyson has been handed a contract extension by Intermarché Circus Wanty until the end of the 2025 campaign. The sprinter has 2 wins already this season. Right, that's all we have time for today. Thanks very much for watching, everyone. I'll see you again very soon. Goodbye for now.